All right, welcome guys. Welcome back to Genius. So in this day three, let's talk about HTML forms. Okay. Basically, all right, in the way we'll be talking this HTML form, we're not going to talk about it the traditional way. Those days when we still used to send we in our form, we will have the method and the action, and when they submit it to take them to know. These days, we even use we no longer do it that way, especially when you're working with React. And this whole program is that you'll also be using React at a later stage. So we'll not be looking at HTML in the traditional way it used to be. It used to be done. Okay. So now, what is an HTML form? An HTML form is used to collect user input. Whenever you want to collect input from users on your web application, you use a form. Even if it's as small as a search box, all right, the user will type in something, then you will now use it. That in the type, you now use it to get something for them from the database. So HTML form is used to collect user input. So it can include text fields, check boxes, radio buttons, submit buttons, and more. We'll be taking a look at some of them, or if not all of them. So the data collected is usually sent to a server for processing. So when you collect this data from users from the form, you actually send it to the server, so to your back end. Now, as a front-end developer, you might not be dealing with backends, but you can be using APIs. All right, you can be using APIs. So we'll also be teaching you how to use APIs. So now the form itself is defined using the form tag. So we have a form tag, the form element. Okay, we have a particular tag or an element, the form tag for defining the form. So we have an element. Okay, so the basic syntax is that the form has a starting tag, and it will now have some content, label, input types. Okay, and then it will have the closing type. So let's go to Visual Studio Code and let's do something. So I'm going to create a new file here. I'll call it day three. I'll call it day three forms. Okay, that's HTML. Okay, so anyway, I don't know. Oops. Okay. All right. I'm just creating everything. My Visual Studio Code is supposed to be helping me out with some IntelliSense, but I don't know why. And I'm not ready to debug it right now. So I will have my head tag. Sorry. I'll have my head tag and I will have my body. For now, I will not focus on the head tag because I will not be needing it. I will not be needing it. Okay, so now I'm just going to create my form tag. Of course, this is how you go about it. The opening tag and then the close tag. Okay, so of course, it will have some content. Okay, so but this is the form tag. Okay, so the opening tag and the closing tag. Okay, so this is the basic syntax. So you can now have labels and whatever, but we are coming to that. We'll build them small, small. Okay, so now let's take a look at some of the attributes of the form tag. We have the action, all right, and we also have the method and the target. But basically, these days we no longer use these things. Okay, we no longer use the action or the method. We no longer, because what we do is that we use JavaScript. Recent modern web development now, they will use JavaScript to collect the data, then use JavaScript to send the data to the server. Okay, so now we can take a look at, there's no need to take a look at the action, but the action, if you're using the traditional method, all right, the action tells the browser the URL to send the data to. So we will not be concentrating on that. The method also tells where the method to use for the request. Then the target is another attribute that tells you where to open the response. Whenever the server comes back with a response, where to open it. Is it to open it in the same place or in another window? So the autocomplete, okay, is used to tell for autofill suggestions. All right. So these are attributes you can actually take a look at. So autocomplete. So when you have your fields, okay, so this will help do autocomplete or not. So no validate. If you don't want the browser to validate your form, you can include the no validate attribute. Okay. But the one we might be so interested is the end type. Okay, it's used for encoding. So we'll talk about it in the later session, later this session. Okay, so now these are common attributes that we use, but from action method and target, I don't think we normally still use it. I have not used it. Then the autocomplete is something you can use if you want to turn on or turn off autofill suggestions in your form. All right. And the no validate if you don't want the browser to validate. Okay, so but basically these are to be left. There is no need to use them. Of course, your browser should validate your input, your form, and autocomplete. It's up to you, okay, who is designing the form. So now let's take a look at some form controls. All right. So what are form controls? Form controls are the content of the form. So we have what we call the input form control. The input form control is the input element that defines a form control for user input. So if you want the user to enter something, a test, all right, you use the input element. So it's inline, it doesn't have a closing tag. So it is an empty element. It is a self-closing tag. Okay, it's an empty element. And it supports many types of input like the test. So it has different types. You can use it to collect tests, you can use it to collect numbers, you can use it to upload files, date, checkboxes, and all those ones. So we'll take a look at them one after the other. So, but let me show you a very simple input tag. So if I go now, I can just say, okay, input. All right, it is a self-closing tag, it's an empty element. So by default, the type is test. So even if you don't say it here, by default, it is test by default. So if I go on and click on live server, go to live server, okay. You can see I have an input, so I can type in anything as a user, and then if I will submit, the browser will use this thing to collect input from the test from the user. So you can type it anything here. Okay. All right. So this is the default. The default is test. So the default is test, even if you don't add this thing. So by default, it is test. So even if I don't include this, the type is test. Even if I don't include, so if I save it, go to the browser, it's still the same thing. The default type is test. Okay. So now we also have some attributes like the name, the username. We'll talk about them later on. Okay. So the type defines what kind of data to accept. The type defines what type of data, what kind of data are we accepting? Are we taking tests? Are we taking numbers? Are we taking dates or images, whatever it is, okay? So we also have the name attribute. This name attribute must be present. The type and the name attribute are compulsory. Although, even if you don't provide a type, it will default to test. So the name is compulsory. The name is what the server, when you actually submit this, the server needs to know who has this value, which which form control has the value. So we use the name as a key used when submitting form data. Okay, don't worry. When we start talking about in JavaScript, we'll talk about form. We also talk about submitting form in JavaScript. So we'll talk about it when we start discussing JavaScript. But take a look at even in React, we also talk about submitting a form. Okay, so if I go back now, if I don't provide a type, it will default to test, but you must give it a name. So the name can be, let's say, username. All right, we want to use it to collect user's name. So when we submit, all right, when we submit, okay, there's another attribute called value. We'll take a look at that later. Okay, so if I just say now value and I say TITI, if I say TITI, that's the username. All right, as I put this value now, it will come here and it will show, once the page loads, it will show TITI, because I have included the value. So whenever the user also types in something, all right, if I don't include this thing now, whatever the user types in will be added to the value attribute. Do you understand? So it's either you give it the value attribute yourself, or the user types in what anything in the test. So whatever text they type in, all right, the browser would put it as the value of this input control. So now when you're sending this to the server, the browser is sending the name of the control and the value of the control. So if you have plenty controls here, form controls here, the browser will send the name and the value of each of the controls that you have. Okay, so now we also have the placeholder. The placeholder shows you some hints. So of course, most of you might know this, or some of you might not know this. If I say placeholder here, if I say placeholder, I would have, let me just say, enter your username. So this is like giving the user a hint. Enter your username. It's used to give users hints. So if I go to the browser now, you can see, and as soon as I start typing, it will go out. That placeholder will go out. As long as the input control is empty, all right, it would not, you will see the placeholder, but as soon as you start typing, the placeholder will go out. Okay, so this is another attribute. So, but I don't know which one to go first. Should we, okay, now let's take a look at different types. Sorry, I don't know if this one is too much for you to grab, but let's take it one by one. This is the type, this is the purpose, and this is the example. So now, if you take a look at the default is test, we have seen it. All right, this will default to a single line test. So if you want to collect a single line test from a user, you use the type test. So the type test is the default, and it is a single line test. So if you want to collect more than a single line, you have to use something that's called a test area, but we'll talk about that later. So if you also want to include a password, user's password, you will use the type as password. And when you say the type is password, it will obscure input for sensitive data. So let's take a look at it. So if I say the type, if I say the type is equal to password, now anything I type in here will be obscured. So if I go, so anything I type in here, you can see, all right? So this is the password type. I believe most of you know these things already. Even if you have not programmed in it before, you have seen it on web applications. So you can also go for email. Okay, so you can also say that a particular input, this thing is going to be email. So you're asking, you want to validate email format. So if you say that the type of the input field is email, the browser will validate it. All right, the browser would validate that the user enters email address. So to explain this better, I would go and change this thing to email, and then I will add a button here, and then I will add a button. I will maybe say submit. So I just want to show you what could happen if the user does not enter a valid email. So because I have said that the type of this input control is email, all right, the browser will make sure that the user enters email address, a valid email address. Okay, so it is actually for validation, but sometimes, not even sometimes, most times, do not come. You also have to, okay, or as a front-end developer, this is okay to validate your browser. So if I type in anything, this is not a valid email. So if I click on submit, it will tell me, you see, the browser has validated it for me. It will say, please include an @ symbol in your email address. So it means that this is not a valid email address. But if I now say, maybe say, I say titi@gmail, all right, so this is a valid address. So if I click submit, nothing will happen. And you can see as I've clicked submit, all right, the browser is trying to submit this thing to somewhere. And what we'll talk about when we talk about encoding, all right, we'll talk about encoding the enc type. We'll explain some things here. Okay, so you can see that the browser submitted it. But because we did not include the action, which is the URL to submit the request to, it wouldn't go through here. But remember, we are not doing that. We are no longer doing old school. Okay, so we'll talk about when we talk about React forms, we'll also even in JavaScript we'll talk about forms on how to submit. Okay, so now you can see, all right, that one was successful. Even if I say tia at, okay, it still says that please enter a path. So it will validate your email. Anything that the user enters there, the browser will validate it. So if you want to collect email address from users, always use the type email. It helps a lot. If you want to collect numbers, all right, somebody's age should not be a test, although they can still enter it as a test. But if you want to make it compulsory that the user is entering a number, you would have to make the type to be number. So if I go back to my code, instead of email here, I will now say number. So the browser would also validate it. Okay, if I save it, go to the browser, because the type is number. If I type in anything here, you see, I cannot even type. Look at it. It will not take anything that is not a number. I'm trying to type in anything that is a character, and it is not taking it. But if I try to type number, it will go through. And there's also something we call steps, all right, and minimum and maximum. So we'll talk about that later when we talk about attributes. So once you make the type to be number, you cannot enter text. You cannot enter characters. You can only take digits. All right. So it is very good for validation. Sorry about that. So you can also go for telephone numbers. Okay. So if you can also say tel, all right. So you can say, I'm using this to collect telephone numbers. So if I go back now, all right. All right. It's actually taking anything because telephone number can take any test. All right. But I believe it also does some validation, but it's not actually validating, but the type is tel. All right. And then when you're using something like email or number or tel, if your users are using it on a mobile phone, all right, once they click on that test, all right, the keyboard will change. The browser would open a special keyboard that they can only type in numbers if it is number, or even email address. It will make sure that it brings out that @ symbol. So you can also try for URL. It is used to, there's a type called URL. It's used to validate the URL format. So if I say URL, all right, it will validate anything I type in here to be a URL, to be a now I have changed it to URL. So if I type in anything, all right, and try to submit, it will validate it. It would say that this is not a URL. A URL should start with HTTPS, whatever, whatever, whatever. So if I go on and say https://example.com, it will work because this is a valid URL. You see, it worked. But if I try to type in anything that is not a valid URL, it will tell me no, no, no. It will validate it. So this is very, very good. Okay, this is very, very good. You can also go for search. All right, there's a type called search. And with this search, even on mobile phone, all right, the browser will bring out a particular, so you can say the type is search. So if I go now, open my browser, the difference might not be much, but sometimes they might include, maybe on browsers or mobile browser, they can include the search, that search icon or something. So this is for search. All right. So you read more about all these things in the book chapters. We have date, we have time, we have month, we have week, we have color. We also have file. All right. So if you want to upload a file, you will use the file. We have checkbox, we have radio button, and I don't know if we have enough time for me to go through all this. Okay. But okay, I'm going to skip date, time, and month and week. Let's try color. Okay, let's just try. Let's just take them one after the other. I hope you'll be patient. So I will go for date. So I will change this thing to be date. I hope you'll be patient enough. So I'll change this into be date. And then if I go, you'll see that the date, you can see, it has given us a date input that we can select the date. Okay. I cannot just say, okay, I don't want it to be all date. I want it to be, let's say time. Okay. I can say, I just want to collect time from user, not the date or this thing. So if I go on now, it will just give us time. You see, it will ask the user, so you can see this thing has changed. So the user can tell us the particular time. All right. So we can also go for date. So we can go for month. All right. We can go for month. We can date, time, local, week. All right. If you just try, I want you to try out month and week. Okay. So I'll also try color. I would also try color. So color will give us a color palette to choose from. So in case you want to collect color from a user, all right, so you can see we have color here. So the user can select any color they want from here. Do you understand? They can actually do a lot from here. So now all these things, we can also do file, but file will have something special that you would, the file will come differently. Okay. So when you say file, this is I wish I have all the time you can see. So you say choose a file. So it will open your folder like this and you can select a file. And then this is the file I have selected and you can submit. All right. So just take your time and go through all of them one after the other. Now, but we also have the one for checkbox. Okay. So sometimes when you have, you want users to, if checkbox, look at the purpose there for multiple selections. So let's first of all do radio button. Let's do radio. Okay. So I might say this is radio. So I might have maybe I'll just take these things out. Okay. So I might have, okay, I will have to give it a name. So the name has to be, um, let's say your favorite color. Okay. So I can have, but this radio button would have value. You have to give it value, and this value will be sent to the server. So I must say this one is red, all right? I might say this one is, the value is blue. So whenever the user selects any of them, they will be selecting the value, okay? So, and I might say this one is, I might say this one is, let's say yellow, all right? So if I go on now, I have saved, if I go to the browser, you can see we have three items to select. And you can see that we can only select them. We can only select one. So if you have options that you want users to just select one option, you will go with the radio button. They would only select one option. And as you're selecting, all right, the value will be sent to the server. The value that you have included here will be sent to the server. So I know that I'm a little bit fast here. So if you have any questions, please throw it in the WhatsApp group. Okay, so but if you want to go for multiple selections, if you want the users to select more than one, you can go with the checkbox. So I can change this thing to checkbox. I can take this thing to the checkbox. Okay. And then if I save, it would allow me to select multiple. I can select more than one item. Do you understand? So if you have any option that you want the user to select more than one item, you can go with the checkbox. And of course, there will be labels. All right. You can add labels to them. So we'll talk about labels later on. So you can use this thing to select multiple. All right. All right. So we also have the range. If you want to, if you want to, if you want users to select a range, so I'll take these guys out and I'll say it is range. So if you want users to give you a range, like maybe you want them to give you their rating, okay? You want them to give you their rating. You can go for this range, but I would want you to go and read more about this range because I will not be explaining too much because there will be some other attributes for the range. So if I go on and open the browser now, you can see this range also has start and end, I believe so, and also steps. It has all those things. So you can use it to select, okay? And you just have to click or hold your mouse on it and you can use the select. So it can be steps, it has some attributes. So we have the hidden field. The hidden field is used to, if you have anything hidden, all right, the browser will not see it. So it will not show in the browser. If I say that this type is hidden, it will not show in the, okay, let me still leave this one and then bring up another one. So I will say the type is hidden. So with this hidden field, all right, it will not be shown to the user. But anything you have here as the value, anything you have here as the value, when the user clicks on submit, it will submit it to the server. Blah, blah, blah here. Anything you have as the value, the user clicks on submit it to submit it to the server. So if I go now to the browser, you will see that that hidden field is not here. But if I click on submit, okay, you can see that we have it. Look at the hidden field here being sent to the server. Let me change the name because let me change the name instead of color. Let me change it to just hidden. Okay, so if I go back to the browser and I click on submit, you can see that we are having it. This is what we call query string. So the server, the browser is sending the whatever we have in the form to the server. So you can see we also have it here. All right, now this one is for the color. Okay, so we have the input as submit. The input, if you set the input to be a submit, if you set the type is submit, it will be a submit button. So instead of, but we prefer to use buttons like this these days. All right, but I can still also say this is an input, and I will say the type is submit. And then I don't need the name, but I can just say value. The value will be the text on the on the input button. So I will say, I can just say submit. Okay. And if I click or if I save it, go to my browser, you can see I still have this submit button. But if you take a look at my code, we no longer have that button there. But we are using this input. If the type is submit, that means it will be like a button. All right. If the type is reset, we have reset. If the type is reset, all right, if you click on the reset, it will reset all the values that you have. Okay, let's say, okay, let me have a very good explanation here. So I will say the type is test. All right. And then if I have the input type here to be reset as a button. So instead of reset, I'll just say reset. So if I click on this reset button, it will change it to, now let's look at it. I'm typing something and I click on reset. It will change everything back. If I type and then I take this one around and click reset, it will take everything back to the normal values they were before. So we have the button. We also have image. So we also have the button, but this one is not. Okay, we also have the button type. We also have the image type. So the image type, if you want to add an image to your button, all right, you can use the image. So you can provide the source and everything about images. They hide the width and everything. So you can try these things out. So now we can take a look at some of the attributes. We have seen the name, we have seen the type, we have seen the value, we have seen placeholder. If you mark an input form control as required, it will ask the user to enter a test mandatorily. So if I say that this test, if I mark this guy as required, that means the user must select something, must type in something. So it is for validation. So that attribute does not have any value. So if I try to, okay, let me change this thing to submit. I'll change it to submit. So if I save it, go to the browser. Now, if I click on submit, look at it will say, because I have made this input, all right, this form control, I've made it to be a required field. So I must fill in some, if not, it will not submit. Let's refresh our page. Okay, sorry. Let me take these guys out. So let's refresh our page. If I try to click on submit, it will not go because this is required. But if I type in anything and submit, it will go through. So if you want if you want to mandate them to enter something, you will have to use a required field. Then if you make the field read only, if you make it read only, that means users cannot type anything inside it. So if I make this guy read only, so they can only read it. They can only read it, but they cannot type in anything inside. And whatever the value, you can also maybe give it a value. So whatever the value is, all right, you cannot change it. Look at it. I made this field read only, all right? So if I go to the browser now, I cannot change it. You cannot change it. You can't. Just try your best. You cannot change the value because it is read only. But if I click on submit, all right, the value will be submitted to the server. Look at it. You can see the value was submitted to the server. Look at the halo here. All right. So we also have disable. So if you disable a particular element, the difference between disable and read only is that with the read only, the user cannot change the text, but with disabled, it will be grayed out. It will be inactive. So uh, if I say instead of read only, I say disabled. I hope it's disabled. Disabled. Okay, so you can see I cannot. It's supposed to be, no? Seems something is wrong. Disabled. That's the correct this thing be. Disabled. Okay. So if I go to the browser, it is disabled, but it is supposed to be showing some this thing. And now look at the difference. Because it is disabled, I click on submit. You can see that the value was no longer sent. The value of this guy was no longer sent because it is disabled. The browser will not send the value to the server. But if it is read-only, the browser sent the value to the server. Okay, some browsers will make it you see that disabled this thing. So we also have step. We have min and max. So when you're dealing with numeric values, you can indicate the min and the max values so that to validate what the users will type in. They cannot type anything less than the minimum. They cannot type anything more than the maximum. You can also have steps for increment. Okay. We also have pattern. We also have auto increment and also focus. So for multiple, multiple can allow to select multiple values or add multiple values. So I think I'm taking too much time on this class already. I would go to the next one. But if you have any question on any of this, please reach out. Reach out, okay? These are very simple. That's why they are very simple to implement. That's why I'm leaving it. Okay, so we have text area. So remember the input field is we want to collect a single text. But if you want to collect multiple text, something like a user's comment or a post or something, then you have to use the text area. All right, you have to use the text area. The text area, you can include the number of rows, that's the width. So the number of rows, that's the height, and also the width. You can include this thing. You can just try it out. So you already know how to write some text elements, some HTML element, and they are so the value, the name, and all those things they also appear here. So if you have a default text here with this text area, maybe I should just do some examples. So I can have some text area. I'll close the text area. Text area. All right. So I can include, of course, I should give it a name. It must have a name. Okay, I can just say comment. All right. And then I can say, okay, I want it to span the rows to be, I want it, the rows is like how many lines? I can say I just want it to be 5, 6 lines. And how many columns, like the width? I can say I want it to be I can say I want it to be maybe 10. So it will increase the width. Okay. The rows will increase the height. So I can put in anything here. I can just say default test. So if I save, go to the browser, you can see we have something here. And you can see, because now I set the call span to be just 10. It is very small. Maybe I didn't get my. Okay, so because look at it, it is 10. That means 10 is very small. That is why. So if I make it 50, the width will be longer, will be wider, sorry. You can see it is wider now. All right. And you can also do something like this. And if you also want the user not to do all these things, there are also attributes to take a look at. But we'll not be going into those details now. You can find out these things yourself, or you can the question, raise it as a question in the WhatsApp group so that we can discuss it. Now, if you submit, all right, whatever that is in this default test within anything that is inside as the content of this test area will be submitted to the browser. So if I click on submit, you can see the name, all right, and this is the comment, all right. So they can also change it and enter blah, 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 all right. And if I submit, you can see we have it here. All right, so this is the browser sends this into the server as query strings. All right, we'll discuss query strings later on for you to understand better. Okay, so anything that you have here will be the default test, but even if you don't add anything here, the user's typing something, it will be all right. So we also have select and the option. So if you have a if you want to have drop down menus, you can use the select. Okay, so let's say we want to give the users opportunities to select to have a drop-down menu that they can select from. So we would have an option. I think this option is self-close. It's an empty. Okay, it's not self-closed. Sorry, it is not self-closed. Okay. So we have option and then we'll close it. Okay, and anything you type in here, you can say we are selecting their colors. So you can say red. Okay. So we say red, black. Maybe we are asking user for blue and then green. So of course, we will have to include the value on these options because anything that the user selects here is what will be sent to the server. So of course, you would have value. So you will have value. So this is the value that will be sent to sorry, to the server. I'll just have to copy this. So all of them will have, just change the values yourself, because of course I'm not sending this to the server, so there is no need. So I will open my browser. So you can see we have a drop down here, so they can select. Okay, they can select. Okay, so but on the load of the page, on load of this page, you can see the first one that is selected here is black. So if you don't want it to be black like this, you can add another option. All right, you can just add another option here, or maybe you say this one, you need to prompt them, select your color. And the thing is this, if the user does not select any of this and click on submit, what will be submitted will be the first option. The first option will be submitted. So be careful when you're doing this. So the first option will be submitted if the user does not select anything. So be careful the way you design it. So now you can see, I can actually validate this, but you can see that the user can, if I submit this thing now, you can see what you submitted is where is it again? Okay, it doesn't have a name. So we didn't give it, sorry, our select should have a name so that the browser will know what it is saying. So we can just say, we have a lot of colors here. We can just say selection, okay? Don't mind the names I'm giving them because this is just for, so if I click on submit, you can see it has submitted the first option that we have here. But if I have selected something here and click on submit, you can see the selection name value pair is now black. Okay. All right. So we also have the button. The button will allow you to actually have, I've shown you the button already. All right. So the type can be submit or button. When it is button, it will not submit. All right, it will not submit, but the default is submit. So let's take a look at this button. So instead of using this, let's talk a little about this button and the types. Okay, so I'll also close the button. Oops, sorry. So I can just say submit. Now I want you to watch out. Now, the default is submit. The default type is submit. Even if I don't add anything there, the default type is submit. So if I still click on this button, it will still submit. Okay, so let me take all these guys out, then refresh the page. Now, I'm using the button element now. So, but by default, the type is buttons. The type is the submit. So if I click on, what happened here? All right. So if I click on this button, it will submit because that's the default. But if I go on and say, no, I don't want this thing, I can use this button. I don't want the type to be submit. So I can say the type is click. Am I correct? Is that click? Okay, sorry, the type is button. So I'm so sorry. Sometimes we just forget all these things. All right, the type is button, not submit. So, but by default, it is submit. So, but watch out. If I go on now and click on this button, it will not submit. But first of all, let me remove these query strings that we have here. Then I will refresh the page. Now, if I click on submit, you can see it's not submitting because this is an ordinary button. It's an ordinary button. All right, it's not submitting. Okay, it's not submitting. So, that is it. So we also have labels. Labels, you have to use labels. But of course, you can see all the inputs that we have here. How would the user know what they are supposed to type in? They don't know, they don't have any clue. So you use the label to tell them exactly what you want them to do. Okay, so the label makes the form accessible, especially for something we call accessibility for disabled people, impaired people. So you have to use your labels. All right, you have to use labels. Okay, and there are two ways you can use these labels. It's either you use it this way by using the four attributes, all right, or you use. So let's go and show you. Short. I'm going to show you So maybe I will have to take a whole lot of these guys out so that we'll just have something here. So let me just go for with one. So I can say I have a label here, and this label I can also close. Okay, so I can say this label and give it, uh, I can just say username. So the user will know what I'm doing. So now if I do this and save, all right, look at what will happen here. All right. So this is telling the user, this is for your username. But if I click on this username, nothing is happening. Okay. And moreover, I'm still making this input is still disabled. Sorry. I have to take this guy out. Okay. So now I can now say I want the user to click. When they click on this label, it will take them, it will hide, it would make the input focus. So I will say I'll use this for attribute, and I'll give it the ID of this. I can just say username. So I'll give it the ID of this input. What input label do I want it to talk to or be linked to? Sorry. I will say this is ID, and the ID here would also be username. So, but look at the way I'm doing it. So look at what happens. So I will save. I'll come back to explain more. If I click on this username now, look at it. This guy is highlighted, but before it wasn't like this. So it is because I'm using this for attributes. It's because I'm using this for attributes. All right. So this is one way to do it. Another way to do it is this way. Instead of doing this now, look at what I'm going to do. I'm going to wrap. I'm going to wrap this inputs under inside of this label. Okay. Now I will just get another input. This time around, this input would be, the name would be, this one would be for, let's say, email. All right. I don't need to do the type thing. Okay. All right. So, but now I can now inside here, I can say email. All right. Look at what I'm doing. Look at what I'm doing. Here, I am putting this input inside of this label. All right. And also entering this text here, this content. Now, if I save, I'm not using the for attribute anymore. But if I go on now, and if I click on this email, look at it, it will still be highlighted. You can see it puts this thing in focus. It puts this thing in focus. So for me, this is the best way. All right. It makes it very simple. You type less. Instead of doing all this for and then the ID attribute, I will just do this. All right. I will just do this. So for me, this is better. So in case you want a break, you can also use the break element. So there will be, it will come down. All right. It will come down. So know how you design this. So we also have something we call a field set. So you can use it field set to group your related fields. So you might have a very long form, and you might not be grouping these input controls. You might be grouping them, all right, based on those that are related. So you might have a long form. Let's say you are designing a very long form, and you can have them grouped. So there's no need for me to, okay, maybe I will just try. So let's just put all these things inside of an input of a field set. So I'm going to grab everything here, or maybe this particular session. All right, this particular session, I will grab it and put it inside of a field set. A field set. All right. Then, of course, I can paste this here. Then, but I can also have a legend tag or element here. This legend will be like a description or a title for this particular field set. I can have more than one field set here. So I can say email contacts. So let's take a look at how this thing looks. So you can have more than one field set in the form. You can see how it is. All right, it's just expanding the whole. We can actually use CSS to style it. so it will be shorter. So you can see how it is. It is spanning the whole, but you can see it's separating it in sections. So that's the field set. Okay. So for form validation, browser handles with the required. You can also, when you're using type like email, URLs, okay, browser will validate it. We also have the pattern. We also have the pattern. So you can have a pattern here, and then you give a pattern. This is regular expression, but I'm not talking about this because most of you might not understand regular expression. So I will leave it for advanced topic. So with this now, this input, we are telling with this input pattern now, we are telling the user, the browser to validate that anything that the user types in here must be characters, either capital or lowercase characters, and it must only be 3 characters. If not, it will throw an error. So let's go and try this. I will not talk about regular expression here. I'm sorry about that, but I can just say anything that the user is typing here in this input, I want to validate here. I can say this. I can say pattern, and it is equal to this. So I'm going to have this my pattern here. Okay. Sorry. I'm going to have this my pattern here. This will be just 3. And I can say it can be anything from A to Z. Okay. Sorry, okay, it can be anything from A to Z. Capital or small a to small z. So with this now, let's go to the browser and see what we have. So we have validated this now. So if the user types in anything, look at we have 4 here. So if I click on submit, okay, sorry, we are no longer using the submit button. Okay, so of course I will just take this guy as since the default is submit. All right, so it will perform a submit action here. So I type in, I have hello is 5 4. So if I click on submit, you look at it, it says it does not match the pattern. So, but of course, you can actually use a placeholder to tell the user what they need to do. So we said give us only 3 characters. So if I go here and now click submit, it goes. Do you understand? So we use this pattern now to validate the characters, the type of pattern that we want the users to enter. So best practices, always use label for accessibility. Make sure that every of your form control has a label. Make sure. All right. Use field set and ledger for grouping related fields. Use post for sensitive data. Of course, we were not using it. Then validate on client and server side at the same time. Keep forms very simple and user-friendly. Okay. So we have something we call the form data encoding. Now look at, if you take a look at this, all right, you can see if we type in, look at it, I have a space between my test here. If I click on submit, oops, okay, we are validating this guy. All right, no problem. Is our email also validated? Okay, let me remove the pattern there, please. Let me remove the validation so that we can actually show what I want to show here. So I want to show you the encoding that the browser does. So if I type in, look at it, and then I have some space between. If I click on submit, you can see the white spaces have been replaced with plus plus. Okay, so now there are different types of form encoding. When you submit a form, the browser encodes the data. The data you're sending, the browser will encode it. Encoding means, I don't know how to explain this here so that we won't get confused. The browser will encode it, and then it's actually for security reasons. So the enc type stands for encoding type. So with the encoding type, you're telling the browser how to encode the data that they are sending. By default, it is the default. So we have different types of encoding. All right. So, but mostly where you'll be using this enc type attribute is when you're uploading files, because now enc type stands for encoding type. So it specifies how the form data should be encoded when submitting it to the browser, to the server. So the browser would encode it. So it is only relevant when the form uses method of post, of course. So when of course, we are not using any action here because we're not using the traditional way. But I'm bringing this thing up because when you're uploading a file, if the method is get, which is the default, the browser would use query strings. And that is what the browser is using here. The browser is using query string. This is what we call query string. I don't know if some of you know what query string is. Okay, but that's not what we are discussing here. We'll talk about it in later time. Okay, so by default, our browser, our form did not include any action or any method type here. So by default, it is using a get method. So now by default, it will go, if the method is get, which is the one we are using now, it will use query strings. But let me not bug you with too much details. If you don't understand it, no problem, you don't need to. Okay, but whenever we have different types of the enc type, so we have this is the default. Okay, this is the default encoding type. It is not, if it is not specified, this is the default value. So it encodes all characters except alphanumeric characters and then a few like this. So it will use the percentage stuff to encode, but spaces will be replaced with plus. You saw it. Those spaces were replaced with plus. All right. So I'm not going to go into too much details here, but this is the one I'm interested in. When you're working with files, all right, make sure that you put the enc type. When you're working with files, the enc type should be multipath/form data. When you're working with files and documents, okay, make sure when your input type is file, make sure that the file you include this multi-type, the enc type should be multi-type/form data. All right. But by default, you can also say it is going to be test plain. All right. So I'm not really interested in explaining this thing here because you might not be needing it here. But what I'm saying is whenever this enc type, it is the way you tell the browser how to encode your data to the server when it is sending it to the server. So if you're using input type as file, make sure that you include this enc type. All right. You don't need to include it in any other one, but if you're using file, make sure you use the enc type is equal to multipath/form data. Okay. All right. So, but you can read this thing up on your own to learn more, or you can ask me a few questions if you want. So, why is enc type important? It ensures that the server can correctly pass the submitted data. It determines how binary data is sent. I believe this might not be, when you forget enc type, file will not work. File upload will not work when you forget the enc type. If you forget to include the enc type, the file upload will not work. Okay, so best practice is always use the multipath/form data when you're uploading files. Stick with the default of this. You don't need to change, just leave it. All right, for test-only forms. Avoid test plain. Don't use this test plain. Test plain means that the browser will not encode it and it will open security vulnerability. So, but when you're debugging, all right, for debugging purposes, you can use the test plain, but of course, you might not be using it now. So thank you very much for taking this class. Make sure you do your test, your assignment, and please reach out if you have any question or any difficulty, okay? We'll see you in the next class. Drop what you learned in the WhatsApp group. Share with us what you learned, okay?